You are not poor because you lack money. You are poor because you believe money creates wealth. I know this sounds hard to accept, because since childhood, we've been taught that if you have more money, you will live better. If you earn more, you will become wealthy. But let me ask you a question. If money truly created wealth, then why are there people who win the lottery and lose everything just a few years later? Why are there people who earn thousands of dollars every month yet still live in constant worry and lack? And why is it that there are also people who start from zero but eventually build an entire fortune? I have observed this throughout my life, not just once but hundreds of times. And I realized something simple, yet it changed the way I see life entirely. Money does not create the person. The person creates the money. Money is like a shadow. You cannot chase a shadow and expect to catch it. But if you turn toward the light, the shadow will automatically follow you. Most people are doing the opposite. They chase money, they pursue opportunities, they try to earn more, do more, but they never stop to ask, have I become the kind of person who can keep money yet? I used to be like that. I used to think that if I could just earn a little more, my life would change. But the truth is, no matter how much more I earned, I kept repeating the same results because I didn't change. And that's when I understood something that everyone should probably learn earlier. You are not paid based on your needs. You are paid based on your value. If who you are doesn't change, then even if money comes, it will leave. But if you change from within, then even if you lose everything, you can still rebuild from scratch. And that is where everything begins, not in your wallet, but in the way you think. In this video, I will not tell you how to make money fast. I will not give you tips or tricks. I will take you back to where real wealth is formed, layer by layer, thought by thought. Every small change that you might not even notice, until one day you look back and realize your life has taken a completely different direction. You see, when you start looking at your life honestly, you will realize something very strange. It's not that you don't have opportunities. It's not that you don't work hard. It's that you are thinking in a way that sends all your efforts in the wrong direction. I once met a man, a normal salesperson. He worked hard, showed up on time every day, never complained. But after many years, his income barely changed. One day, he asked me, "How can I make more money?" I didn't answer right away. I simply asked him a question. "Have you become someone worthy of a higher income yet?" He went silent. And that is also the moment when many people start to feel uncomfortable, because the answer is no longer in the outside world. It turns back to you. You can work 10 hours a day. You can try harder than everyone around you. But if your thinking is still the same as yesterday, then your results will also repeat like yesterday. I realized that life does not reward busyness. Life rewards growth. There's a big difference between those two things. A person can spend all day running in circles and still think they are moving forward. But another person takes time to change their thinking, upgrade themselves, and with just one right step, they go much further. You see, money is not something you chase to get. Money is something you attract when you become the right person. But this is where most people get stuck. They look at wealthy people and they think, that person is lucky. That person had better opportunities. That person started in a better position, but they don't see how that person thinks. They don't see how that person reacts when facing difficulties. They don't see the small decisions that person repeats every day. I once observed two people starting from the same point, same job, same salary, same environment, but after just a few years, one stayed in the same place. The other went very far. The difference was not in opportunity, it was in how they saw opportunity. One saw risk and stopped. The other saw possibility and moved forward. One asked, "What if I fail?" The other asked, "What if I don't try?" And those questions quietly shaped their lives. I began to understand that a poor person is not someone who has no money. A poor person is someone who always thinks in a way that keeps them where they are. They choose safety, but don't realize that safety is limiting them. They avoid risk, but don't realize that no risk is more dangerous than not growing. And then they wonder why their life doesn't change. But how could it change when their way of thinking has never changed? I'm not saying you have to be reckless. I'm not saying you have to gamble everything. But I am saying you have to start looking at life from a different perspective. Not, what could I lose? But, who could I become? Because when you start asking that question, everything will begin to change. You no longer just work to make money. You start working to develop yourself. You no longer just look for easy opportunities. You start looking for opportunities that make you grow. And that is when you are no longer the one chasing money. you become the person money starts coming to. But pause for a moment, because if you think that just thinking a little differently is enough, then you have missed the most important part of this journey. Because there is a truth that few people tell you: changing your thinking does not mean your life will change immediately. It means you have to go through a process. A process where you are forced to face yourself. And that process is what determines whether you truly change or are just comforting yourself. I still clearly remember a period in my life when I thought I had understood. I read books. I listened to talks. I started to believe that just changing my thinking would make everything better. But then reality taught me a lesson that no book ever explained deeply enough. Understanding does not mean changing. You can hear hundreds of times that wealth starts from mindset, but if your life is still the same, then maybe you haven't truly understood it. Because when you truly understand, you will not be able to live the same way anymore. You will start looking at your old habits with a very different feeling. Choices that once felt normal now make you uncomfortable. It's like when you've gotten used to the light, you can't go back to living in darkness without noticing it. And that's when the real journey begins. Not when you gain more motivation, but when you start losing comfort. I used to think motivation was the key, that if I had enough inspiration, I would change. But then I realized motivation is like the wind. It comes and it goes. You cannot build a stable life on something that constantly changes. What you need is something deeper: discipline. Discipline is not an emotion. Discipline is a decision to do what needs to be done even when you don't feel like it. I have met people with a lot of motivation. They start strong, full of energy, full of determination, but after a short time they stop, not because they don't want success, but because they didn't build the discipline to continue when the emotions disappeared. On the other hand, I have also met very ordinary people, not too outstanding, not too remarkable, but they have one thing: they do what needs to be done every day, even when no one is watching, even when there is no immediate reward, and over time they surpass all those with potential. Do you see what is happening here? Wealth does not come from explosive moments. It comes from repeated actions in silence. But there is another factor even deeper than discipline: environment. You can be a very determined person. You can have clear goals. But if every day you live in an environment where everyone around you thinks small lives safe and fears change, then over time you will start becoming like them. Not because you are weak, but because the environment is always stronger than willpower. I didn't believe this before. I thought that if I was strong enough, I could change on my own. But then I realized you cannot fly high if you are being pulled down every day. You cannot think big if every conversation around you revolves around limitations. And that's why wealthy people don't just change themselves. They change their environment. They choose people who force them to think bigger. They go to places where they feel small so they can grow. This is not comfortable. In fact, it is very uncomfortable, because you will feel like you are not good enough. You will feel like you are falling behind. But that feeling is actually a sign that you are in the right place. And gradually, the way you think begins to change. The way you see the world begins to change. You no longer react emotionally. You begin to observe, think, and choose your response. Because there is something most people don't realize. You cannot control what happens to you, but you can always control how you respond. Poor people react immediately. Wealthy people pause for a moment. That pause is where all the difference is created. A rushed decision can cost you years. A thoughtful decision can change your entire life. And then you begin to understand wealth is not having more money. Wealth is the ability to control yourself in critical moments. But even if you have discipline, even if you are in a good environment, there is still one more thing quietly shaping your future. Something you use every day, but may have never truly paid attention to: the way you see time. I want you to pause for a moment and ask yourself a very simple question. Are you living for today, or are you building for the future? At first, this question may seem obvious. Who doesn't want a better future? But the interesting thing is, the way you answer with your daily actions is often completely different from what you think. I used to be like that. I said I wanted a better life, but what I did every day only served short-term comfort. I chose what was easy instead of what was right. I chose immediate good feelings instead of long-term value. And then I wondered why my life didn't change. Do you see what is happening? Your life is not shaped by what you want. It is shaped by what you repeat. Poor people tend to think like this. How do I feel today? If I'm not in the mood, I'll do it later. Meanwhile, rich people think differently. Will this help me become who I want to be in 5 years? Do you see the difference? One lives by emotion. One lives by vision. And over time, that small difference becomes a very big gap. I have met people who constantly delay learning. They say they will read books when they have time, but time never just appears. It has to be created. Meanwhile, there are people who, no matter how busy they are, still make time to develop themselves, a little every day, quietly, without needing recognition. But after a few years, they become a completely different person. That is the power of long-term thinking. It does not bring immediate results. In fact, for a long time, you will not see any change. And that is exactly why most people quit. They don't have enough patience to wait. They don't have enough belief to continue. They want fast results. They want instant rewards. But life doesn't work that way. Life is like planting a tree. You cannot plant a seed today and expect fruit tomorrow. You have to water it, take care of it. Be patient, while nothing seems to be happening on the outside. And that is the hardest part, not working hard, but continuing when you don't see results. I wanted to quit many times. I questioned whether what I was doing was really worth it. But every time, I asked myself one question. If I stop now, where will I be in 5 years? And the answer always kept me going, because I realized that the cost of persistence is always less than the cost of regret. And gradually, I started to see time differently, not as something to spend, but as something to invest. Every hour you spend developing yourself is an investment in your future. Every right decision is a brick that builds your life. And on the other hand, every time you choose what is easy, you are quietly destroying your own future. Do you see? Wealth does not come from one big decision. It comes from thousands of small decisions every day. But even if you understand that, even if you start changing how you use your time, there is still one more thing, quietly controlling many of your decisions. Something you rarely notice, but appears in almost every choice you make. Emotion. And if you don't learn how to understand and control it, then no matter how good your plan is, you can still ruin everything in just one moment. I want you to be honest with yourself once. How many decisions in your life are made when you are calm? And how many decisions are made when you are angry, anxious, or afraid? Most people don't realize that. They are not really deciding. They are just reacting. A word hurts them, they react. An opportunity looks risky, they withdraw. A small failure, they give up. Not because they are weak, but because they were never taught how to control their emotions. I used to be like that too. I made bad financial decisions, not because I lacked knowledge, but because I let emotions lead the way. There were times I bought something just because I felt I deserved it. There were times I ignored opportunities just because I was afraid of failure. And each time, I moved further away from my goals. Do you see what is happening? Emotion is not the enemy, but if you don't control it, it will control you. Poor people make decisions based on how they feel now. Rich people make decisions based on long-term value. One person looks at an opportunity and thinks, "Do I feel comfortable?" The other looks at the same opportunity and asks, "Is this right, even if it's hard?" That is the difference. Not in the opportunity, but in how they respond to it. I learned that the most important moment in every decision is not when you act. It is the pause before you act. That pause may only be a few seconds. But in those few seconds, you have a choice. You can choose to react emotionally, or you can choose to respond with thought. That is where the rich and the poor separate. One is carried away by emotion, the other controls their emotion. But understand this, controlling emotion does not mean you feel nothing. It means you don't let emotion decide for you. You can still be afraid. You can still be anxious. You can still doubt, but you don't let those things stop you from doing what is right. I have stood in front of very difficult decisions. Decisions where if I had followed my emotions, I would have chosen the easier path. But I started asking myself one question. If I weren't afraid, what would I do? And the answer always led me in a different direction. A harder one, but a more correct one. And over time, I realized that the best decisions in my life were rarely the easiest ones. They were the decisions where I had to overcome my own emotions to make them. Do you see? Wealth is not about how much money you make. It is about whether you can hold yourself steady in difficult moments. Because you can build something for years, but with just one emotional mistake, you can lose everything. And that is why rich people don't just learn how to make money. They learn how to become the kind of person who can keep money. But even if you can control your emotions, even if you start making better decisions, there is still one more thing that most people overlook, something not loud, not obvious, but quietly shaping your entire life, the people around you. And if you don't recognize the power of this, you may be trying to change while being pulled backward every day. Look at your life slowly, the conversations you hear every day, the people you meet often, the thoughts that repeat in your mind. Have you ever asked yourself how much of that is truly yours? Or are you just absorbing it without realizing? I used to believe I had full control over my life, that what I thought was my own choice. But then I started observing more closely. I realized that the way I think is largely shaped by the people around me. If I'm in an environment where people always talk about difficulties, I start seeing difficulties everywhere. If I am in an environment where people always complain, I start feeling like nothing is enough. Not because I want that, but because humans tend to become like their environment. Like a seed, you can have a very good seed, but if you plant it in poor soil, it will not grow. On the other hand, an average seed, planted in good soil, cared for properly, can grow strongly. You are that seed, and your environment is the soil. I used to try to change myself while keeping the same environment. I read books, I learned, I tried to think positively, but every day I returned to the same conversations, the same beliefs, the same limitations. And do you know what happened? I went back to who I was. Not because I lacked determination, but because I was swimming against the current every day. You cannot rise if the people around you don't believe you can. You cannot think big if every conversation you hear revolves around fear. And then I started doing something very difficult. I began to change my environment. Not immediately, not drastically, but little by little, I sought out people who think differently. People who made me feel like I had more to improve, not to feel inferior, but to grow. I sought conversations where people talked about opportunities, possibilities, and growth. At first, it was uncomfortable. I felt like I wasn't good enough. I felt like I didn't belong. But then I realized that discomfort is a sign of growth. Because if you always feel comfortable, you are probably not changing. And over time, what I heard began to change. What I thought began to change. What I believed also began to change. And then, what I did began to change. Do you see? You don't have to change everything immediately. You just need to change what you are exposed to every day. The books you read, the people you listen to, the conversations you join, because all of those things are quietly reprogramming how you think. And once your thinking changes, your life has no choice but to change with it. But there is something very subtle you need to understand. Not everyone around you will change with you. There will be people who don't understand you. There will be people who say you are thinking too big. There will be people who try to pull you back to where you used to belong. And that is when you have to make a decision. Will you keep your old environment or will you choose your future? Because you cannot have both. You cannot keep everything the same and expect your life to be different. I had to face that myself. And it was not an easy decision, but it was a necessary one, because I understood that if I didn't change my environment, then that environment would continue shaping me. And I would become a version of myself I didn't want. But even if you are in a good environment, even if you are surrounded by the right people, there is still one more important question above all. What are you moving toward? Because if you don't have a clear direction, then no matter how good your environment is, you can still get lost. Imagine this. If you get on a train but don't know where it's going, can you really expect to arrive at a better place? It sounds obvious, but many people are living exactly like that. They wake up every day, work, earn money, spend money, then repeat. Not because they don't want to change, but because they don't truly know what they are moving toward. I used to be like that too. I worked very hard, but inside I had no clear picture of where my life was going. I just thought that if I kept trying, things would eventually get better. But life doesn't work that way. Effort without direction only creates exhaustion. You can run very fast, but if you are running in the wrong direction, every step only takes you further away from where you want to go. And that's when I began to understand something. It's not that you need to do more. You need to be more clear. Clear about who you want to become. Clear about the life you want to build. Clear about the values you refuse to compromise. Because when you have that clarity, every decision becomes simpler. You no longer have to ask yourself, should I do this? You only need to ask, does this bring me closer to the person I want to become? And the answer will reveal itself. I once met a young entrepreneur. He did many things at the same time. He tried every opportunity. He followed every trend, but after a while, he got nowhere. Not because he lacked ability, but because he lacked direction. He was like a train, constantly changing direction before going far enough in any one path. On the other hand, I also met very ordinary people. They didn't do too many things, but they knew exactly where they were going, and they stayed consistent with that direction year after year, slow but steady, and then one day, everything began to connect. Efforts that once seemed scattered started to produce results. Do you see? Wealth does not come from doing many things. It comes from doing the right thing long enough. But to do that, you need a strong enough vision, a vision that makes you willing to say no to easy things, a vision that keeps you going even when no one is watching. Because there will be days you have no motivation, you have no results. You even start doubting yourself. And on those days, your vision will be what holds you, not your emotions, not your circumstances, but your clarity about where you were going. I began writing down what I wanted, not just money, but the person I wanted to become, a disciplined person, a person with value, a person who can make a difference. And every day, I started living according to that image. Not perfectly, not immediately, but step by step, and over time, I didn't just achieve more, I became more. And that is what most people don't realize. Wealth is not a destination. It is the result of becoming the right person. But even if you have a vision, even if you know where you are going, there is still one final challenge. A challenge that all of us must face. Doubt. Doubt about yourself. Doubt about the path you've chosen. Doubt that makes you want to go back to safety. And if you don't overcome it, you may stop right before everything starts to change. I want to tell you something that you may have felt before, but never named. There will be a moment in your journey when everything starts to feel unclear. You've changed the way you think. You've started acting differently. You've moved away from old habits, but the results haven't come yet. And in that period, something begins to appear, quietly, gently, but strong enough to pull you back. Doubt. It doesn't come loudly. It doesn't shout that you should quit. It just whispers, maybe this isn't for you. Maybe you've aimed too far. Maybe you should go back to what's safe. And if you don't recognize it, you will start to believe it. I've been in that moment. I've asked myself whether everything I was doing really had meaning, whether changing myself would truly lead to a better life. Because when you don't see results, everything becomes hard to believe. You start looking around and see others who seem to be moving faster. You start comparing. You start doubting. And then you ask yourself, am I on the wrong path? That is the most dangerous moment. Not when you fail, but when you start doubting the right path. Because if you turn back then, you will never know what was waiting ahead. I learned that doubt is not a sign that you are on the wrong path. It is often a sign that you are on the right path but haven't gone far enough. Think about this. If you've never done something big before, how could you feel completely certain when you start? Uncertainty is part of the process. It's like walking into a dark room. You can't see everything immediately, but if you keep moving, your eyes will adjust, and then you start to see more clearly. But if you stop or turn back, you will stay in that darkness forever. I began to look at doubt differently, not as something to avoid, but as something to understand. Every time I doubted, I didn't ask, why do I feel this way? I asked, what is making me afraid? And usually, the answer was very clear. I was afraid of failure. I was afraid of wasting time. I was afraid that I wasn't good enough. But then I realized those fears are not the truth. They are just stories I tell myself. And when you start to see that, you take back control. You are no longer led by doubt. You start leading yourself. You can still doubt, but you don't let it stop you. You keep moving, step by step, even when you are not certain, because you understand that certainty does not come before action. It comes after action. And then something very interesting begins to happen. What you once doubted starts to become reality. What you once feared is no longer as scary as you thought. And you begin to realize that the biggest limit in your life is not your circumstances, not your money, but what you believe is possible. But even if you overcome doubt, even if you keep moving forward, there is still one final question that you must answer yourself. A question no one else can answer for you. Who do you truly want to become? And when you answer that question, everything else will begin to fall into place. So go back to the beginning. Not money, not opportunity, not circumstances, but the way you think. You may have heard this before. You may have nodded and continued living the same way. But this time, I want you to pause a little longer. Look back at everything we've just gone through. How you see money, how you respond to risk, how you use time, how you control emotion, how you choose your environment, and how you define your direction. All of those things are not separate. They connect together to form who you are today. And who you are today is creating the life you are living. That is the truth. Not to blame you, but to give you back control. Because if your life is the result of your thinking, then it also means you can change it. Not overnight, not with one big decision, but with small changes repeated every day. You don't have to become perfect. You just have to become better a little each day. One better thought, one better decision, one more correct action. And over time, those small changes will compound. Until one day, you look back and no longer recognize your old self. That is how real wealth is built. Not from the outside, but from within. Not from money, but from mindset. And when you change your mindset, you don't just change how you make money. You change how you live, how you see the world, how you see yourself. And that is true wealth. If something in this video resonated with you, don't ignore it. Hold on to it. Think about it. And more importantly, act on it. Because understanding without action changes nothing. And if you want to continue this journey to build a stronger mindset every day, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone you know who also needs to hear this. And I want to leave you with one question. If you knew that your life would completely change just by changing your way of thinking, would you start today or keep delaying? Leave your answer in the comments. Because sometimes one small decision is the starting point of a completely different life. I have always believed that success is not something you chase. It is something you attract by the person you become. And I truly appreciate that you stayed until the end of this video. See you in the next video to gain a clearer understanding of money